I just, I just, I just speak my peace, keep my peace.
What's good, y'all? Welcome to the Speak My Peace podcast. As always, I'm the gracious host, Greg Lacey. Like we always do about this time, all this episode reaches you all in good health, good wealth, and to take care of yourself and your loved ones, as we know how important that is. Before we do jump into anything, I do want to say rest in peace to John Singleton, the creative, the visionary, the legend, person responsible for bringing us titles such as Four Brothers. Fast and Furious is coming out with a new installment soon. One of the greater installments in that franchise is Too Fast, Too Furious. He was at the helm of that. I said Four Brothers already. Poetic Justice, Higher Learning, and obviously Boys in the Hood. I speak about often how important it is to control and own the narrative surrounding our people, surrounding the environments we grew up in, and just the Black experience. No one can tell the story like we tell the story. No one can tell the story better than someone who has set foot in those environments. Nobody can tell a story like someone who has walked those shoes. And this is a person, when I think about that, who exemplifies that. Well, also, when I try to stress the importance of that and provide that example is always John Singleton. Just thinking about movies like Boys in the Hood, and thinking about movies like Higher Learning, the importance of those stories being brought to the big screen, and the importance and authenticity of those stories. If he wasn't someone who has been in those environments, who have walked those paths, those stories and those movies wouldn't be as great as they are. So I'm very appreciative of John Singleton and everything he's done. Obviously, we starting off the episode like that because this is coming on the tail end of the series finale of Snowfall. I have the same sentiments, and my introduction to Snowfall was before the trailer, was before the teaser, it was the announcement of it. I know a lot of us, with big shows would pick it up as it began to pick up steam. But I was on Snowfall, and I'm not saying it to brag, I'm saying it just to stress the importance and my belief and how much of a fan of John Singleton I am. When Snowfall was first being shopped around to networks, and I found out what it was about, and I found out that John Singleton was at the helm of it, I was already instantly bought in because I knew that however they chose to tell this story, it would be authentic. And playing out 6 seasons later, it was very authentic. But John Singleton was the person who brought me to this show because his name was attached to it, because the premise, I knew that it was something that I could get behind. And 6 seasons later, I am proud that it was something that I decided to watch. Shout out to everyone though. Aside from John Singleton, he was the person that introduced me to it, probably introduced a lot of you all to it, but there was a lot of writers, there were a lot of producers, a lot of actors involved in making this series as great as it was, and I'd be remiss if I didn't shout them out as well. I'm grateful to see this series from the culmination through its completion. I can't think of too many series that were as big as this on TV that I've saw from the culmination through a completion. There's been a lot of great shows that I've seen come to fruition and then it get canceled after season 2, and it doesn't, see its finale as it's supposed to be. A lot on TV, especially with the Black shows. And this was a show that I've been following from when it was first announced that it was in the works through the series finale, and that experience was one of a kind. Not only because I saw it from that culmination through this completion, but just because of how big of a show this became. Like, I was already bought in from the jump, and then it took on its own wings after season 1, and it became this worldwide sensation, but really a cultural sensation. So it was like one of those things to where I was watching with you all and sharing my opinions with you all, and we were all having conversations regarding this show. That's just how important this show was for me, but also people of my community. And so to be able to experience that from start to finish, and then see this series finale with a lot of you all, it was something like no other. Again, off the top of my head right now, I can't think if I've ever seen another TV show from the culmination through its completion. one of the biggest finales, or two of the biggest finales I think of, was off the top of my head is Game of Thrones and Breaking Bad. But I picked up both of those shows as they had already picked up steam, so I can't think of any other show that I saw from the beginning to the very end. So I'm grateful to experience that. With that being said, man, the critics on this series finale, they were out. A lot of people were happy about it. A lot of people were emotional about how this ended, but I also saw a lot of people on social media upset about it. Not really upset about how it was shot, but they just didn't like how Franklin Saint's life ended up. A lot of people were drawn into this character of Franklin, which I'll get into in a little bit, and I think because they couldn't let go of that person, they couldn't let go of that image, it was hard to see him as this man so desolate, this man who was emotionally just robbed, financially robbed, and it just seemed like he was in despair. He didn't have anything. A lot of people could not sit with that, and because of that, they decided to point fingers as to why he turned out that way. And let me say this. Franklin Saint life ended up that way because of him. Yes, a lot of situations happened, a lot of things went sour with certain people who he entrusted, a lot of people who he helped it is not a word. A lot of people who he helped, but at the end of the day, Franklin Saint's demise is because of him. They say a lot of times that pride is the downfall of many men, and Franklin Saint is no one that's excluded for that. Franklin Saint was a man of pride, and because of that, his pride began to eat him up, and it began to drive him delirious. A lot of you all may have missed that again because you are still tied into this image of Franklin, which I'll get into in a couple minutes. But it happened. It happened before your eyes, whether you want to omit it or not. It happened. People began to point fingers at other culprits as to why someone else's life. Like in life, you get dealt bad hands. What you decide to do with those hands is entirely upon you. You can't look to place blame on other people. And this is no different. I know this is a TV show, but it was very authentic. And I started to see a lot of people point fingers at other people and put them as culprits as to why Franklin turned out the way he turned out. And it wasn't their fault. Obviously, one of the main culprits was Louis. Thinking about just how they began to go to war, thinking about the turmoil between the family, thinking about just so many things that they were going through, and people chose Louis as one of the main culprits. A lot of people forget that Louis was who she was because of Franklin. In the situation that we got to in season 6, to where Louis was tied up in a warehouse and she was about to be raped or killed or wherever the case it may be, it was because of Franklin. A lot of people forget that, so they just tend to think about like, oh, it's Louis' fault. Louis wanted to be stingy. Louis wanted to be bigger than what she was, and that friction caused Franklin to turn to where he was going delirious and he was killing people and things like that. And that wasn't. There was a lot of things that led up to the event to where Louis and Jerome were separate from Franklin. And you have to also remember that Franklin did a lot of things to get to that. And we're going to get into that in a little bit. Another culprit people want to point their finger at was Sissy, his mother. Because obviously she killed Reed, and how that was a turning point and what drove Franklin to where he was in terms of losing his money, in terms of going crazy, in terms of just being so desperate for this money that he has to do certain things that Franklin, who we have grown to know, would never turn to. Y'all forget that not only one did Reed kill this woman's husband, two, Reed is ruining her son's life. And so I'm not mad at Sissy for killing Reed. I know a lot of people are mad because it was like, he was going to get $37 out. He gave her the password, and everyone goes off skipping on rainbows and skipping into the sunshine. And that's not what it was going to be. We watched Reed for 6 seasons be this robot, this man with no emotions, this man who will kill anything to protect himself, this man who does not let go of grudges for anything, but for some reason, y'all believe that this was going to be his turning point. After Franklin had almost tortured him to death, he was going to let Franklin walk off scot-free. I didn't believe that. I don't know if y'all believe that, but it was something necessary for Sissy to do. Mind you, this was something Franklin should have did in the first point. You know, his money had got taken. He had gotten to the point where he was torturing this man, and Reed wasn't giving him his money. So much to the point to where he told him that I'm not giving you that money because that money is mine. Everything that you have been afforded over these last 5 or 6 years has been because of me. And because it's been because of me, I can keep that money. That money is my money. And so at that point, Franklin should have killed him. Let me say this. I didn't even like when Franklin got caught by Reed and he turned into someone else. Like, we know Franklin to be a very stern person. We know Franklin to be a very brash person. We also know Franklin to stand on his word. And so when we got to the point to where Franklin is then captured by Reed and now he's pleading for his life and trying to talk out of Reed, it did not remind me of the Franklin who we have been seeing for the past 4 seasons. Seeing Franklin pleading for his life was weird because, again, this had been a character who we have seen have been about business. And so when you get to the point to where essentially it was on sight for him and Reed. You know, Reed took your money, you killed his father, you told him you were going to kill everybody who he loves. At that point, those are killing words. It's like, if I see you, I'm going to kill you. If you see me, you have to kill me because I'm going to cause harm to you. And Franklin had to accept that. So to see him start to plead out and cry and whine when he believed that Reed was going to kill him, it just didn't sit right with me. And so when you get to that point to where the tables are flipped and now you're torturing Reed and Reed is pleading for his life, but despite him pleading for his life, telling you that he's not about to give you the money that he stole from you, you have to kill him. Like, there's no other option. I understand that there's going to come consequences with killing an ex-CIA agent, but I'd rather live with the consequences of this man not being here rather than have to have $37 million and still look over my shoulder for the rest of my life thinking that this man will get retaliation someday. So what Sissy did is she took matters into her own hand and said, we're not going to live our life looking over our shoulders. We're not going to live our life with this chain reaction of what may happen if he decides that he wants to interfere with our lives again. I'm going to eliminate all that, and I'm going to take care of this right now. And so I applaud Sissy for killing that man because her son was too scared to do so when he should have done so, if we being quite frank. And on top of all of that, you know, when it got to the point to where Franklin was so desperate to get that money, he didn't even want to speak to his mom no more. At this point, he didn't have any more family. His father was killed by this ex-CIA agent. His uncle was killed in a shootout that was orchestrated essentially by Franklin. You have to remember, again, Louis got caught because Franklin gave up her whereabouts or where she goes when she goes on horse riding. And so when she got caught, he realized the seriousness of the situation. He then went to go tell Jerome. But if you don't tell Kane where Louis is going, this whole situation doesn't happen. You still have an uncle. But Franklin was at this point to where he doesn't have an uncle, he doesn't have a father, he doesn't have an auntie because they're beefing. The last resort is his wife and his mother. And to get that money, he was willing to get rid of his mother. And so Sissy, I think at that point, it clicked for her that this is not my son anymore. This is someone that's so desperate and so money hungry and so money driven that he would do anything to attain that money. Go on to the next culprit, Leon. People were saying Leon turned his back on him because Leon didn't want to give him $3 million. And that was just probably the most absurd reaction I've seen from people because Leon, let's say this. Okay, going back into this Teddy thing, Leon gave Franklin the $500,000 that saved Franklin's life. We have to remember that also wanted $500,000 in a passport. Franklin went to Leon to get that money. And then he gave it to Oso. Oso didn't show up when he was supposed to, but he ended up showing up and saving Franklin's life. If Leon doesn't give Franklin that $500,000, Oso doesn't show up, and Franklin is probably dead. And that's the end of that story. But Leon saved him by giving him that $500,000. He gave him a lifeline because that $500,000 led to him essentially capturing Teddy. So when he comes back and he's all out of money, he don't have any money, he's telling Leon to give me all of your money and I'll pay you back. Leon says no, which is the smartest decision he could have made. Because yes, this is your best friend, this is your closest friend. Yes, he's good for paying you back. But this person who's in front of your face asking you for your very last, every dollar down to your very last penny is not the same person who you've known up until this point. So you risk lending your money and not getting them back. Aside from that, Leon's rationale for not even giving her money is that Sissy made a sacrifice and he didn't want to dishonor that sacrifice by giving him that money. Sissy made the sacrifice because she realized the monster Franklin had become due to the money. And Leon essentially realized that he would be feeding that monster giving him that money. And so he just refused to do so. Yes, it scorned their relationship for a short amount of time, but it was a sacrifice that he had to make. He had to sacrifice scorning their relationship to protect his friend going down a deeper hole. Another culprit, people said V. People said V robbed Franklin, and that's the reason why they got to where they got. I'm going to say this, disclaimer, and I think I spoke about it on here, but maybe I just spoke about it on social media. Season 5, I did not like V because I thought she had ulterior motives. I thought that there's going to be some drastic event and she was going to show her face, and I was going to be like, yeah, I knew that she looked kind of weird. When season 5 went on about, and V never altered her character. She never appeared to be this person who, she didn't, who she wasn't. I think it was just weird because they just introduced her out of nowhere. Like he only had one love interest for 4 seasons, or 2, I guess you can say. He had 2 love interests for 4 seasons, and then out of nowhere comes this woman, and they're talking about getting married and they're having kids, and it was just like, that seemed weird. So I always expected V to be a crook, to her to do something wrong with him. And she never did. Season 5 ended and she never did. But what she did do for him was she protected him. She was taking care of the business. She was taking care of him whenever he was going off the deep end, and she was constantly reminding him to stay sane, constantly reminding him what they were building towards. Aside from all that, she was taking care of them financially, making the investments, giving him, key pointers or certain things like that. V was his protection outside of, the protection who was once his mother, protection was once his uncle, the protection that was once his auntie was now his woman who he confided in. And she took care of him. So much so to the last episode to where he called her and told her about what his mother had did. And her response was, you need to come to me. No matter what you're got going on, come to me so I can take care of you. So she was still willing to take care of him. And what he do? He repay her by putting his hands around her throat, a pregnant woman. So it's just constant reminder of, like, y'all pointing these fingers at these people who were key integral people in his life, but he did them all wrong. Let it be a life lesson. I know it's a show, but you can't do people wrong and expect them to do right by you. Yes, Franklin helped set up a lot of those people and helped them make a lot of money, but that money came with strings. That money came with dealing with a monster. The monster was who he is. And so when you start to realize that this money is coming with strings, I had to do what I can to protect myself to get away from it. V did that by moving out of the country. Leon did that by saying no. Sissy did that by putting herself in jail. Louis did that by talking to the plug herself. Like, all these people had to do things to protect themselves from this man because he was so egotistical and so money driven that he would have ruined their lives more than he had already done so. I think a lot of the critics' response of, them not liking how Franklin's life turned out is because they have a hard time separating the Franklin who was introduced to us in comparison to the Franklin who we had known through 6 seasons. The Franklin who was introduced to was this 20-year-old kid who was wide-eyed, who was very smart, who was very well-spoken, who was his mama's boy. That was the key thing. He was a mama's boy. He was raised by a single parent. His father was an alcoholic. His father was living on the streets, but he was a mama's boy. So much so that he tried so hard to protect his mother, or to keep the money he was making away from his mother so that she don't know what he was doing so that he doesn't disappoint her. And so season 1 was this not even the maturation. Season 1 was really just this culmination of him being his mama's boy, him making money and doing certain things, but still returning home, still, having this conversation, him still trying to protect his mother from this terrible employer, him trying to better his mother's situation, him trying to protect their living situation. And because of that, the writers did a very good job of tugging on our heartstrings. We all love those underdog stories. We all want the underdog to prevail. We all want the underdog to win. And that was Franklin Saint. He was this kid who attempted to do things the right way. He attempted to go to college, and essentially, it didn't turn out the way he wanted to do. So he come back home. He shuns off, making fast money until he realized that he's really good at making that fast money. So now he's turning towards that. And so Franklin began to mature, and I think a lot of the people who don't like how the season ends, they never let go of that 20-year-old kid. So the series began in 1983 and it ends in 1990. That's a 7-year maturation process. That's going from a 20-year-old boy to a 27-year-old man. And so a lot of people never let go of that 20-year-old boy who was his mama's boy. And because the writers did such a damn good job of tugging on our heartstrings, of creating this empathetic character, people couldn't let go of that. Franklin was far from that kid who was introduced to us. We just have to be honest with ourselves. Like, Franklin began that transition to get away from that innocent kid, I would say season 3. And I understand that he didn't purposely murder Kevin, but he murdered Kevin, and that's the reality. He murdered Kevin. But that's not when the transition started. The transition started in prison. If you all remember, when he goes to prison, he gets into it with the Mexicans, he gets into it with Ray and his boys, and he gets beat up. After he gets beat up, his mother comes to visit him, and she sees him all bruised and bloody, and she begins to break down. What does he do? His father is there. He begins to cuss at, basically essentially his parents, get her the hell up out of here. And I understand that from a survival instinct. Like, you can't have that. You can't have your mother breaking down, because especially if you're a mother's boy, that's going to break you down. But you're in an environment where you can't show those emotions because you're already getting beat up. But 2, people want to think you're softer than what they already think you are. And they already think you soft. So he can't have that. But when you see that, when you see him cussing at his parents, you see him essentially cussing at his mom, that's not the Franklin that we once knew. This is a different kid. He's telling his father, get here the F up out of here. I can't have this. Next prison visit, it's his uncle and his best friend. His best friend sees him bruised and bloody, and he has a different reaction to his mother. He gives him tips on how to change the narrative of what he is and who he is in that prison. Following that, he goes back into the dorm, beats up the dude who took his shoes, goes to Rary and tell them, y'all put another hand on me, we're going after your family. That is a shift. That is a transition to Franklin Saint. He's no longer that mama's boy that y'all once knew. He's now transitioning into the Franklin who we knew and loved in season 6. And there's nothing wrong with the new Franklin. But we have to always remember that Franklin that we once knew was not the same Franklin. This Franklin is a damn demon, quite frankly. But it was just like that maturation process, a lot of people forgot about it. And the main reason why we forgot about it is because his mother was still around. His mother was a very integral part in his climb to success and helping him. Her running the shelter once his father died. Her just being around, coming back from Cuba after his father was murdered. Him having that emotional talk with her when he's breaking the news to her that V is pregnant. A lot of these things they did so strategically to remind us that although this is this young kingpin, 25, 26 years old, he still answers to his mother. He's still a mama's boy, despite him being this larger-than-life figure, despite him being this brash individual, despite him being this emotionless individual, he's still this mama's boy. And they did so well strategically reminding us of that people forgot that he is no longer that person. That person is a shell of who he has become. And because of that, I think you get the response that you get from the finale. But me personally, I love the finale. It was very authentic. Speaking about, telling the stories of our people, no one could have done it better than someone from those environments. Like, I didn't grow up in that time. I didn't grow up in that specific environment, but I know stories of what those times were like. And so when my family members and my friends tell me of those stories, visually what I think and visually what I paint in the picture is what Snowfall was. And so they did a very damn good job in showing us what those times and what those environments look like. I love the finale because it was very authentic in a sense that in life, you have to make decisions, right or wrong. You have to make decisions. And when you make those decisions, they come with consequences and repercussions, whether it's a good consequences and repercussions, whether it's bad. But at the end of the day, you have to live with those decisions. And Franklin made a lot of decisions that he had to, at the end of the day, live with. And towards the end of the episode in the series finale, he began to go off the deep end, going from him being this larger-than-life figure, him being this wealthy individual, him almost figuring things out in terms of about to get this money from Teddy, to him having absolutely nothing. I think that if Franklin would have had time to step back and reconvene and try to figure things out and try to assess what's next, he would have had a different outcome. But because of his ego drove him off the deep end, there was no recovery. His ego led him to putting his hands around Veronique's neck, because she saw this man who was down and out, and she tried to make a decision to, for one, help them sustain the life that they have built as much as possible, but two, protect their assets. And so she didn't sell anything, she didn't do anything, but she just got a feeler out to see, if everything does go bad, at least we have this safety raft. And because of that, he felt like she betrayed him. And because she felt like she betrayed him, the Franklin Saint, who we've grown to know over the past 6 seasons, he's crazy. And so he has an emotional reaction. He puts her hand around her neck and he cusses at her, his pregnant baby mama. Same thing with Leon. Leon, one of his closest friends over the past not one of the closest, his closest friend, almost like a brother over 6 seasons. He asked him for his very last dollar, and Leon says no. He then threatens him. This is him making a rational decision, him making an emotional decision. This is that pride of Franklin Saint. Him going to his mother, being down and out after Veronique leaves him, after Leon tells him no. He asks her for the home that he bought her. She doesn't respond to him, because you have to remember, he said he's fine with living his life without ever speaking to her again. Now he's coming back with her, crawling to her, asking her for a favor. And essentially she denies that favor by not speaking to him. He has an emotional reaction. He cusses her out. He said he wishes she was dead. He wishes that Teddy shot her. That's an emotional reaction. So we have this character that constantly displays these irrational behaviors, and this person who was just not in control with their emotion, the person who was not in control with their reaction, yet we still wanted him to have this fairy tale ending of walking off into the sunset with all the money in the world. It was like, no, there was no way in hell that this show was going to end that way. And I'm glad that it ended the way it ended, because it was a very accurate depiction of what happens when you have a fall from grace. And that's what he had. He had a fall from grace. He had it all at one point, and then he lost it all. And because of that, I think it was very authentic. We think of these situations to where, people are on top of the world and they making fast money, but it only lasts for so long. That's the reason why it's fast money. It doesn't last forever, but last forever wouldn't be fast money. There's no longevity attached to fast money. You end up dead, end up in jail, or you're going to lose it all. And thankfully, we didn't see him dead or in jail. He just lost it all. But in losing everything, he gained his freedom. And that was the beauty in all that. It was like they made us have this emotional reaction because we go from the transition of this mama's boy to the drug kingpin to now this transient who doesn't have anything. And it's emotional for us because we see him have nothing, have everything, and then have absolutely nothing. And it's a wild roller coaster to go on because we were introducing him as this 20-year-old mama's boy. Now he's this 27-year-old who's roaming the street, addicted to alcohol, or who was an alcoholic. It was a wild transition, but it was authentic. And they did a very good job at showing us that in life, there's consequences and repercussion for every action. And these were Franklin's consequences. But despite those being his consequences, internally, he was happy. And I think that was the best thing to get from it. I know it's kind of ironic because he used his word, but it as a viewer, it put me at all. It's like, it sucks to see him that way, but at least he's happy. At least he's, as he said, doesn't have any chains around his neck. At least he's not living under the guise or the thumbs of the CIA. But because of that, I can be happy with that ending. I could be content with that ending because it could have been way worse than what it was. Aside from that, just the little nuggets that they showed us within this finale was also very, very appealing, very appeasing. Considering that the first brick he sold was worth, he got $12,000 from it. His last resort in this finale was to get that money back from Peaches. He finally got to Peaches and got the money, and the money is $12,000, the same exact money he made when he got into the game. The money that enticed him to make more money. I don't think that was ironic. I think that was strategically built that way. It was a full circle moment. Another thing, going back into the beginnings, he was introduced as this kid who was working his 9-to-5 at this liquor store for this liquor store owner who trusted him enough to open and close a liquor store and allowed him to work there and do his homework, right? And so, if you all remember in the first season, one of the not pivotal scenes, but one of the memorable scenes in that first season was him closing up, and then Melody, Kelvin, and Leon come into the liquor store, and he let them, get liquor for free, obviously because he's working there. And Melody is asking him, why he don't drink, and he's explaining that he just don't like how it feels. He doesn't like how it makes him feel, and he'd rather stay away from it. To the very last image we see of him is an alcoholic. Aside from that, thinking about him speaking about freedom, the conversation where Melody asked him, what he's getting out of working at the store, and he's telling her that he's learning how to run a business, and he's learning how to run a business so that he can gain freedom. And then at the very end of this finale, we see him going into that same store at alcoholic. So he went from turning down drinking with his friends to entering that same store for that very same addiction. We went from seeing him speaking about him wanting freedom and things like that to going through his entire, 7 years of working under the guise of Teddy, making a lot of money, but still working under the guise of Teddy and not being free. To the very end, the last image we see of him is him walking the streets and him telling his best friend that he's finally free because he don't have to worry about any of that stuff anymore. That was powerful. That was a very powerful conversation. Even the conversation that he had with Leon and telling him that he's proud, like that's something that we have to see. When I get back into that, stressing the importance of us owning and controlling our narratives, we don't see that conversation a lot with young black men. So for him to tell his best friend that he's proud of him, for one, telling his best friend that that's the best friend he's ever had and that he's proud of him, that was a conversation we had to see. That was a conversation that had to be shown on television at a moment like that was so monumental, but also so big because a lot of people were tuning in. Those are conversations that are not often had in public. And so to see that, it was also one of those just powerful. They did a lot of things well in this finale. From the beginning to the end, they did a lot of things well, and I'm glad that it played out the way that it played out. I'm glad that I seen this finale with y'all, and I'm glad that I can use 30 minutes of this podcast to express how grateful I am to see this series come to a completion. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I remember or that I want to cover on that episode, which I'm pretty sure it is a lot of stuff. But as we get out of here, actually I don't have a what to watch for this week, so we're just gonna get out of here. That's Speak My Peace Podcast for this week. I'm out.